This is a story about love, but not the kind you see in movies. Stay tuned, this one feels a little too real. Sunlight spilled through the half-open curtains, brushing Ji-hyun's room in gold. She sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through messages, waiting for her best friend, Min-suk. Usually, their mornings were filled with laughter, but today, a quiet tension lingered. He lingered too long at the mirror, his smirk slightly off, his gaze lingering on her favorite notebook. When Min-suk stepped in, greeting her with his usual charm, Ji-hyun forced a smile, but suspicion flickered in her chest. It was subtle, almost laughable, but it felt real. Beneath their jokes and morning chatter, something unspoken shifted, the fragile trust between them quietly stretched, a warning she didn't yet understand, the first ripple in a friendship that seemed perfect, but was quietly cracking. At school, the cafeteria buzzed with chatter and clattering trays. Ji-hyun and Min-suk slid into their usual corner, the hum of classmates wrapping around them like a familiar cloak. Yet something felt different. Min-suk laughed a beat too long at someone else's joke, his eyes flicking to Ji-hyun with a hidden calculation she didn't understand. She stirred her lunch absent-mindedly, noticing the way he leaned slightly forward, as if staking claim to a conversation that should have been theirs. Small comments, almost teasing, carried sharper edges today. Ji-hyun tried to mask her unease with a smile, but every glance hinted at a quiet contest, one she hadn't realized had begun. Their friendship, once seamless, now felt like a delicate performance. She sipped her drink slowly, sensing the first fractures beneath the surface of their laughter. After classes, they walked through the quiet streets, backpacks slung casually, pretending nothing had shifted. Ji-hyun stopped by a small fountain, tossing a pebble into the water. "You've been different lately," she said carefully. Min-suk shrugged, smiling but with a slight edge in his eyes. They talked about dreams, fears, trivial victories, yet under the words, an unspoken tension thrummed. Min-suk's gaze lingered too long on her notebook again, the one she'd bought for herself, a silent obsession she couldn't name. Ji-hyun laughed at one of his jokes, but the sound felt hollow. There was a tiny fracture here, almost invisible, but it whispered of things she didn't want to see. Their friendship felt like a delicate glass, sparkling, familiar, but ready to shatter if handled wrong. That evening, Ji-hyun returned home to find a message on her phone, a photo she didn't recognize, her notebook in Min-suk's hands, with a caption teasingly hers. Her stomach sank. She knew he had it, she didn't know how, but the amusement in his words cut sharper than she expected. She confronted him when he called later. "It's just a joke," he said easily, but Ji-hyun's chest tightened. It wasn't the notebook, not really, it was the disregard, the quiet testing of boundaries. For the first time, she felt that subtle shift, the sense that the Min-suk she trusted could act for himself, without thought for her. The seed of doubt was planted. She laughed weakly, agreeing to let it pass, but her mind replayed the image over and over, a warning she couldn't yet define. Sleep didn't come easily. Ji-hyun lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Min-suk's smile, his hands on her notebook, the way he laughed that afternoon. Part of her wanted to brush it off, it was just a joke, after all. But another part of her tightened like a spring. She recalled every small detail she had ignored, the lingering glances, the subtle possessiveness, the way he seemed to step just slightly ahead in their friendship, marking territory. Her mind raced through moments she had dismissed, now appearing in a new light. Trust, she realized, was no longer certain. A quiet alarm pulsed in her chest, warning her that something unseen was shifting. Their friendship, which had always felt like home, now trembled on the edge of something she couldn't yet name. The next morning, Ji-hyun scrolled through social media, freezing at a post she didn't expect. There he was, Min-suk, holding her notebook, sharing a private joke with their classmates. Her stomach churned. He hadn't asked, hadn't told her. The comments piled in, laughing emojis, teasing captions. She felt exposed, the warmth of trust evaporating instantly. Every small act from the past week replayed in her mind, the lingering looks, the way he had steered conversations subtly, his charm turning her boundaries into playgrounds. Ji-hyun realized this wasn't just a harmless joke anymore, it was deliberate. Her heart raced with anger, confusion, and disbelief. How had someone she trusted so completely learned to operate in secrecy, twisting moments she thought were theirs alone into performances for others? Ji-hyun couldn't ignore it any longer. She found Min-suk sitting alone under a tree, autumn leaves drifting around him. Her voice shook as she asked, "Why did you post it? Why my notebook?" Min-suk's eyes flickered, amusement barely concealed. "It was nothing," he said too easily. Ji-hyun's chest tightened, noticing the hesitation in his fingers and the way he avoided her gaze. Every smile and joke from the past week now seemed layered, intentional. Trust that had always felt safe now appeared fragile. A cold knot formed in her stomach, a realization that the friendship she had taken for granted was being quietly tested, and Min-suk was the one holding the scale. By evening, rumors began circulating at school. Someone had seen Ji-hyun's notebook, and the credit for her ideas, her doodles, her personal thoughts, was quietly being claimed by Min-suk. Whispers followed her down the hallways, eyes judging, friends uncertain. Ji-hyun felt a mix of humiliation and rage, the betrayal sinking deeper. The small joke in the park now became a public display. She tried to explain, to clarify, but Min-suk's charm smoothed over the truth. Everyone laughed at his version, and she realized how easily perception could be controlled. Her safe world was unraveling, and the person she trusted most was orchestrating it. Min-suk's influence grew. He started steering group projects, subtly undermining Ji-hyun, always under the guise of friendship. His words were measured, playful, yet every gesture chipped away at her credibility. Her friends hesitated, caught between loyalty and the charm he wielded effortlessly. Ji-hyun felt trapped in a web she didn't see being woven. Every attempt to assert herself was met with laughter or clever deflection. He smiled as if nothing were wrong, yet each smile left a mark, a quiet assertion of control. She realized betrayal wasn't only about grand gestures, it could live in everyday interactions, in the invisible ways someone rewrote reality around themselves. She clenched her fists, vowing silently not to let him break her entirely. That night, Ji-hyun sat alone in her room, notebook closed, heart pounding. She ran through every conversation, every small incident from the past days. A chilling clarity settled in, she had underestimated Min-suk. The jokes, the photos, the subtle claims of her ideas, all calculated. Her mind raced, feeling the helplessness of being outmaneuvered by someone she considered closest. Trust, once effortless, now felt fragile and foreign. She realized that her world, her life as she knew it, was shifting, and she hadn't noticed the first tremors. The day of reckoning had arrived quietly, leaving Ji-hyun to face a difficult truth. Min-suk had begun taking pieces of her life, one subtle act at a time, and she had to find a way to reclaim them before it was too late. The betrayal didn't arrive quietly. It exploded. During a school assembly meant to celebrate student achievements, Ji-hyun's ideas were displayed on the screen, her sketches, her concepts, her words, but Min-suk's name stood boldly beneath them. Applause filled the hall. Ji-hyun felt the room tilt. Her ears rang as she scanned the crowd, searching for someone who would notice the truth written all over her face. Min-suk stood confidently near the stage, accepting praise with practiced humility. He didn't look at her. In that moment, Ji-hyun understood something devastating. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was replacement. He wasn't just borrowing pieces of her life anymore, he was stepping fully into it. Her silence had been permission. Her trust had been the door. And now, in front of everyone, he had walked through it without hesitation. After the assembly, voices surrounded Ji-hyun like static. Some congratulated Min-suk. Others avoided her eyes. No one asked how she felt. She walked out of the hall slowly, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the air felt too sharp, too real. She pressed her back against a wall, hands trembling, replaying the moment again and again. The humiliation wasn't loud, it was suffocating. Her work, her identity, stripped away in front of an audience that never questioned the story they were given. She realized how easy it was to erase someone without touching them. All it took was confidence, timing, and silence from the right people. Ji-hyun slid down to the ground, clutching her bag tightly, fighting tears she refused to let fall. Not yet. Days passed, and Ji-hyun felt herself becoming invisible. Group chats went quiet when she spoke. Friends hesitated before responding, their loyalty diluted by uncertainty. Min-suk moved easily among them, laughter effortless, reputation untouched. She watched from a distance as her place in conversations disappeared, replaced by him. The world adjusted quickly, as if she had never been central to it at all. The loneliness wasn't sudden, it was gradual, creeping in through unanswered messages and averted eyes. Ji-hyun stopped trying to explain. Every attempt sounded defensive, small, weak. She began to understand the cruelty of manipulation. It doesn't shout. It convinces everyone else first. And when you finally speak, your voice feels unfamiliar even to you. Min-suk thrived. Opportunities followed him, praise, leadership roles, invitations that once belonged to her. Ji-hyun saw her handwriting reflected in his success, her ideas reshaped into his story. What hurt most wasn't the loss. It was the ease. He wore her life like it fit perfectly. His confidence grew as hers eroded. Each smile he gave the world felt like a quiet taunt, reminding her how replaceable she had become. She wondered when the shift had happened. When admiration had turned into entitlement. When friendship had become strategy. Standing in the shadows of a life she once owned, Ji-hyun felt something change inside her, grief hardening into clarity. That night, Ji-hyun opened her notebook again. Not to mourn what was taken, but to remember who she was. Page after page held proof. Dates. Sketches. Thoughts written long before Min-suk ever touched them. For the first time in weeks, her hands steadied. She wasn't powerless. She had been silent. And silence, she now understood, could be broken. The fear didn't disappear, but it shifted, reshaping itself into resolve. Ji-hyun closed the notebook carefully, her reflection staring back at her from the darkened screen of her phone. Min-suk had taken her life in pieces, but he had made one mistake. He had underestimated what happens when someone stops trying to survive, and starts preparing to reclaim everything. Ji-hyun didn't rush to expose Min-suk. Instead, she watched. She listened. She documented everything. Every casual lie. Every borrowed idea. Every moment he slipped and revealed too much confidence. Her silence confused him. He expected confrontation, tears, desperation. Instead, she withdrew with purpose. In class, she spoke less but observed more. At home, she organized her notebook, backing up dates and drafts, building a timeline he couldn't rewrite. This wasn't fear anymore. It was control returning quietly. Ji-hyun learned something powerful, the same patience that allowed betrayal could also dismantle it. She stopped trying to be believed and focused on being undeniable. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A teacher asked Ji-hyun to explain her creative process during a small review session. Her heart raced, but her voice stayed steady. She opened her notebook and began, calmly, clearly. Dates aligned. Drafts matched. Sketches evolved naturally, each page telling a story that couldn't be faked. The room grew quiet. Questions followed. Ji-hyun answered without accusation, without emotion. She let the work speak. Min-suk watched from across the room, his confidence faltering for the first time. Ji-hyun didn't look at him. She didn't need to. The truth was no longer hers to defend, it was revealing itself. After class, Min-suk stopped her in the hallway. His voice was low, urgent. He spoke fast, trying to regain control, excuses, half-truths, familiar charm. Ji-hyun listened without interruption. When he finished, she met his eyes calmly. "You didn't steal my ideas," she said softly. "You stole my silence. I won't give you that anymore." He froze. Not because of anger, but because he realized she was done reacting. Done explaining. Done needing his approval. She walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing in the space where control used to be. The recognition came quietly. Not in applause, but in restored trust. Friends began asking again. Teachers listened differently. Ji-hyun rebuilt her place without demanding validation. She focused on her work, her growth, her boundaries. The pain didn't vanish, but it no longer defined her. Min-suk faded into the background, his influence shrinking without the attention he once thrived on. Ji-hyun learned that reclaiming your life doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like peace returning slowly, deliberately, on your own terms. Months later, Ji-hyun passed Min-suk in the hallway. They exchanged no words. No tension. Just distance. She realized then that the story had ended, not with confrontation, but with growth. The life he tried to take had transformed into something stronger, clearer, entirely hers. Ji-hyun stepped outside into the afternoon light, breathing deeply. She wasn't defined by betrayal anymore. She was defined by what she chose to protect, to rebuild, and to walk away from. Some friendships don't end loudly. They end when you finally choose yourself. Years later, Ji-hyun sat in a quiet cafe, sunlight warming the table as she worked on a new notebook. This one was different. It wasn't filled with fear or proof, only ideas she trusted herself with. Her life had changed in ways no one applauded loudly. She chose carefully now. Friends. Opportunities. Silence. She no longer rushed to be understood. She knew who she was. Somewhere in the city, Min-suk existed only as a memory, not a wound, not a victory, just a chapter that had ended. He hadn't taken her life after all. He had only revealed how easily trust can be mistaken for access. Ji-hyun closed her notebook and smiled faintly. What mattered most was this: everything he tried to steal was never what made her whole.